So like me and Jimmy can pass this back and forth, but that's a good question. So, because, well, if you don't mind, Jimmy, let me ask one before that, okay? All right, so what I was going to ask,
I was just making small talk.
you hold this and kind of, try to get it on me as much as possible. All right, T, so what I was going to ask you is, how did you get into radio? What piqued your interest in?
Well, of all things, my father did a little part-time stuff when I was growing up in the little town of Maryville, which is about 50 miles north of St. Joe, Missouri.
Okay.
And I've got some pictures of him somewhere of him sitting there queuing up a record or whatever, just a little black and white thing, and that's probably in the 50s. And he was acquainted with somebody at the radio station there, so that's how he got involved with it. And then when I was probably 10 or 11 years old, we were out driving around one day with my dad and I and my sister probably, and we drove past a radio station. I said, well, hey, can we stop and let me go in and look and see what's going on in there? He said, well, okay, that's fine. So it did turn out to be a guy who was a senior in high school. And so they were still running commercials on little 3-inch reels of tape.
I remember those little things. Remember
Yeah.
we made some, yeah.
So that's the way they ran commercials. So he had tape recorders and he's busy stringing up one after another and in between the songs and everything. But that's how I got started in it. And then we moved to St. Joe, and I guess it was 64. It'd been my freshman year of high school. And so one of the radio stations was downtown St. Joe. And so occasionally I'd go up and it was an old KFEQ used to be there originally. And then they moved when they had the TV station out to the east part of town. And so this other radio station moved from the Hotel Roubidou down to the 5th floor of the Howard building. And so I'd go back and they had the big double pane glass because they actually had bands and stuff doing things back in the 30s and 40s when KFEQ was there. They actually had a station band that would come in. And they did so much live stuff.
Oh, the radio?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
okay.
radio. And it was just kind of a farmer's type of station, because it got probably 100 miles around in the daytime. So, and country music was kind of farm music, I think, at that point in time. That or the big band stuff. And,
right.
And the farmers probably weren't into the big bands because they couldn't go down to the nearest town and see the big band play on the weekend, but they could sure see some of their farmer friends down there playing the drums and guitar and trying to sing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyhow, I would look through the double windows into the control room, and I did that for probably a year or two. And then when I was 15, I actually met one of the disc jockeys there. And so
do you remember his name?
Rich Robin was his name. He was originally from Minnesota, and he had spent time in the Army, and he got out of the Army and got him a job in Rolla, Missouri, I'm told. And then somehow he went to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and he ended back up at St. Joe. And at that point, the station was top 40 rock and roll. And so that was obviously the kind of music I liked. So I'd show up there a couple of afternoons after school because a bus transfer was close to the building. And so he let me be a high school reporter from Central for the football and basketball games with who scored what and if they won or lost the night before, and then he'd play them back, the next day on the air. And then they had a request show on Sunday afternoons, a call-in request show. And so I would be in one of the other rooms, and they had like 2 or 3 lines that came in, and so I would be answering the phone calls and scribbling down what they wanted and take them into
like a screener,
basically. Yeah. But I wasn't putting the people on the air. I was just taking the information. And then as time went on, I used to hang out with him in the control room, and on Fridays they had the new top 40 survey come out. And back then they took each of the records and they used a grease pencil, and on that dead track that was just on the outside of the label but inside of the actual music, they would write in grease pencil what the number of the song was 40 or 20 or 15 or whatever. So that became my every Friday afternoon task of going through and taking the old numbers off and putting the new numbers on as they did the countdown show.
Wow.
And
That's a lot of work, though.
well, yeah, but it was all fun, and they were having rock and roll dances that summer at the Eagles Lodge out in the Belt Highway, and KKJO had ones up at the Frog Hop, so they had competing teen dances. And then I hung around enough, they trusted me to run the Sunday morning religious programs. So I actually got to sign on the station at 7 o'clock Sunday mornings and ran it up until noon. And there's a half hour between 10:30 and 11 where I got to play music and actually talk on the radio. So that's how I actually
Got started.
I was riding my bike to work, you know, because
Yeah.
I couldn't drive at that point.
Right. That's a
And so
cool
then
story.
I just kind of stuck at it.
Yeah, I just want to look at something here. I want to make sure we're doing. Yeah. This will get a lot of editing. But anyway, but that's cool. That story won't get. That's very interesting. But I want to go back. You brought up the Ruby Doo, and then the Howard Building.
Right.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I probably am, because you mentioned KFEQ, but KUSN was never in the Howard Building, or
No,
was it?
They were in the Howard Building. They were there. They were the last occupants in the 5th floor before the building was torn down during the demolition for urban renewal.
Okay, and when did they tear that down?
Gosh, I do not.
I know that was after we left, which we left in what, 76? Yeah.
I don't recall what year they tore it down. I could probably look it up somewhere.
I was curious.
But that was the only way we got out of there, is because they had to go to a new location, so they built a new station.
So KFEQ left there, and I know they went out there somewhere. Was it off the Belt Highway?
40th and Farron, yeah.
Farron, okay.
They had the big, super tall tower you could see
Yeah.
from anywhere in town.
Yeah, I remember that. And then, so the KUSN slide in there after KFEQ?
Right,
Okay.
because they already had the.
But did you work at KUSN any?
Yeah, that was where I was working.
Is that how you met Dad?
Yeah, because they were rock and roll until September of '66, and then that's when they were just a daytime station. And FM, they had an FM signal, but they didn't have anything on it to speak of, because FM monitors or radios were not that plentiful.
Right.
So it was just kind of there burning up electricity. And so they decided that since they're going to be signing off in the wintertime at 5 o'clock, they thought they'd try easy listening music, you know. So you had the Frank Sinatras and your Peggy Lees and Sammy Davis Jr. and all that junk. And that stayed around for about a year, and they got a network that, I think it was ABC, so they had network news.
Mm-hmm.
And so that failed, and then that's when your dad ended up coming up in '67, if I remember correctly, in the fall, like September or
Yeah, I'd have
October.
been 5. That's about right. Yeah.
So that was when he and I crossed paths, and then I did news for him. I did afternoon disc jockey for a while when I was in college, and then we moved to the new building out on Leonard Road, which is out by Deer Park, next to the interstate, just south of 36 Highway, and that's where we last worked together.
Oh, really? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Because I knew Dad. Well, Dad ended up at KFEQ, though, right? Is that
He went to KFEQ after he left KUSN.
right?
He was over there for a while, and then he went to Kansas City.
Right, to KRBC or something like that.
KCKN.
KCKN.
Yeah, which was an old line country AM station.
Yeah, I remember it. We visited there a couple times. Me and Jimmy used to go hang out at the Indian Springs Mall.
Yeah, because it's
A lot of
right
times.
across Interstate 635 there, right off State Avenue.
Yeah. Did I run all over your question?
No,
Go ahead.
no, he answered.
Oh, okay.
That was
Okay.
it. Yeah.
And then, okay.
I didn't know where they crossed
Well,
paths.
and then on your, I'm gonna ask you on throughout your career, and then kind of go back a little bit on you and Dad working together.
Okay.
So now so you were at KFEQ. Is that when, did you leave there and go to KKJO?
I never worked at KFEQ. It was KUSN.
Oh, okay, I got you. KUSN.
Right. It was still
You were
there.
just there. Okay, my bad.
No, that's fine. That's fine. And then I got a full-time job there when I graduated in '72, and your dad left shortly thereafter, and he went to KFEQ and worked for a while over there, as I recall.
Yeah, he did.
And then I guess it was '76 or so. I was still working. I was program director at KUSN then, and the guy that was the news guy also ran a board shift there, a jock shift. And so at that point, KFEQ decided they were going to go to 24 hours a day. And they were doing country sunshine. It was just a marketing type of thing.
Yeah.
So the other guy that I was talking about, Gary Porter was his real name. He was talking to KFEQ about a job because he wanted to do something different or something bigger. And since they had the big signal at night, he got the job to go over to work midnight till 6 in the country format. Meanwhile, I had heard what was going on, and so I was getting kind of antsy, so I went over and talked to the people at KKJO, and they decided they were going to go 24 hours a day to compete against KFEQ. So yeah, they had me go out, and I did a little audition in their production room, and they hired me, and we both gave notice at KUSN on the same day, and we both left. So I mean, that was the nucleus of the station, just boom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that left like one full-time person and another part-time person, and Warren Reiner was trying to figure out where the hell do we go from here.
When it was still KKJO, I remember, I went to, and this ain't about me, but just real quick. When I was in high school, or junior high school or high school at Central, because see, we left in my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
At Central, so I wasn't there that long. And I went to Bodie for 7th and 8th, but I think it was during Bodie, 7th, 8th grade. The son of the owner of KKJO, I went to school with him, and I used to go to their house on the weekends, and they had a whole bedroom, spare bedroom in that place, set up just like a control room of a
Really?
radio station. And we used to sit in there. And,
What was his name?
I can't remember. That's why I was asking you.
Oh, okay.
I can see the boy's face, but I cannot remember. Little blonde-headed boy.
And that everybody back then had a MARTA unit, which is you take it out, plug it in, and it's just a one-way thing, and you would use the phone and talk to the station and square away what you were doing, and then you were out there and you just picked up the mic and did your thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know any of these kids' names.
But I listened to KKJ a lot because I was always into rock and roll. You know?
Oh, yeah.
As far as I remember, that was the only rock and roll station in St. Joe, wasn't it?
Yeah, at that point.
I thought it was.
Yeah.
But we were already gone, yeah, when you worked out there.
That was wasn't that right on the Belt Highway?
Just north of
The
Mitchell.
big glass front.
Yeah.
I remember it. As a
Yeah, they
kid.
call it the Showcase Studio.
Yeah.
That's what the big deal was.
I remember seeing it.
Yeah, people
It
would
sticks out in my mind, but
people would pull off the shoulder there and watch your work and wave at you and do all this other crazy stuff.
Yeah, they pulling the news off teletypes from AP or whoever.
Yeah, it was.
And then you would actually read it out of the control.
Yeah, read it out of that room.
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't like broadcast from another place and aired over.
No,
it wasn't. What
it was
was the
just
word I'm looking
It wasn't
for?
like a network or anything.
Right,
It
yeah.
was just the same building,
Yeah.
same floor, just rooms next to each other.
Because I can remember hanging out as kids. Sometimes we'd end up down there. I don't remember how, but we'd end up down there while Dad was running the shift, you know. And I can remember him going over to those teletype machines, you know, and figure out what you want, rip it off. And,
Oh yeah.
and there was always a distinct smell in that room of the ribbon and the paper and.
Oh yeah. The ribbons were purple ribbons.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, they'd run, they'd get to the end, and they had a little brad or something on there that would force them to go back the other way. So they keep going back and forth one direction to the other. And after a while, they'd get so bad you could hardly read it. So then you'd have to whoever was there at that point got stuck and happened to change it.
Yeah.
And so when you did that, it always happened on the weekends and nobody else was there. Ended up doing it. You walk around with purple fingers for 3 or 4 hours after that was all said and done.
Yeah. So I want to hit also, because I've been, you know, like I gave you that thumb drive. I've been, I started actually a couple years ago recording that and did about the first 11 tracks, and I got out of it and was doing other video things and whatever. But here within the last 3-4 months, I really got back into converting those reel to reels of the history of country music, and I think I counted a total of 40.
Sounds about right.
And I've given you, you know, 24 of them. When I finish the rest of them, I'll send them off to you.
Perfect.
But so did that show? Did that run on like a Saturday or a Sunday in like an hour or two at a time each week, or how was that?
As I recall, it was like 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday morning from like 9 till noon or
Okay.
10 till noon, something like that, 10 till
Yeah.
1. And the main thing of it was just a sales tool for them. It had value, you know, to the listeners, but it also was attractive to get a listener, and they can count on it being on the next Saturday. So you're gonna tie up people for 10 or 12, 15 weeks, however long it would take to be played.
Yeah.
And so they'd go and sell it to Klein Motors or the cleaners or whoever the sponsors were. So it was mainly a source of revenue for them, as well as filling an entertainment value.
Well, it's fascinating stuff. I don't know who the narrator of that is. You may know.
I don't even know.
But and do you know where that was recorded out of?
No, I'm sure it came out of Nashville, but
That's what I
there had
thought.
been a history of rock and roll that had been done in Los Angeles
Right.
2 or 3 years prior to that. So I assume that this was kind of a
Yeah.
copycat type of thing.
Well, it's fascinating. In converting it over, I've found out, you know, it starts in like 1922
Uh-huh.
with like just a couple of fiddle players, you know.
Right. And PBS, 4 or 5 years ago, did a country music history type of show that ran probably for 15 hours and had all audio and video from the very beginnings as best as it could assemble it.
Did you ever work a shift where you had to deal with that?
Yeah,
History?
I used to run that. That was part of my shift, as I recall. So
Yeah.
I definitely ran it.
I hadn't figured out the codes because it's got tracks and then numbers and whatever and some other stuff, but there's each one of those, I should have brought one with me, but each one of those boxes that has a reel in it has a sheet of paper with it's Dad's handwriting. You
Uh-huh.
can tell it's his handwriting.
Uh-huh.
And and I didn't know if that was just like, okay, on this reel, you're playing this number, this track number, and
Well, you just played it from the beginning to the end of it. It was just, you put it on, you played it.
oh, okay,
And then you had a break for the commercials.
Right,
and then
right,
you queued
yeah.
it back up,
yep.
and then you start it back up, and that's the way the whole thing worked.
Yeah, it's really cool too, because as I've been doing this, it, you know, starts out for first track, whatever, at the beginning, it's the history of country, you know, that little
Right.
jingle.
Uh-huh.
And then you got the narrator, he'll say something, they start playing, and they'll interview different country
Right.
stars and maybe play 1 or 2 full songs during it.
Uh-huh.
And then at the end, they run that little jingle again. He's like, stay tuned for more of the history of country music, you know,
Right.
and then I'll stop it because I know there's going to be a gash.
Uh-huh.
But what's so interested in it is I figured out, I'm like, I think this must have been a cue for the DJ, because just before the next segment comes on, you'll hear this thump. It's like a thump. And as soon as that thump goes, it starts playing.
Ah,
And I'm like, I bet that's where they cued it and stopped it, you know.
could have been.
So that's what I've been doing. I've been following that. I'm like imagining this is how this jockey did this.
Yeah.
And it works perfect every time,
Yeah.
you know.
Now, I don't recall that
It's
necessarily because you had the ability to turn the reels
Right.
forward and backwards so you could cue it up.
And
And I
that's,
wonder if maybe they didn't record one segment and then they stopped, and then when they recorded the next segment, when you start a reel-to-reel machine, you could hear
that could be. That
hear a
could
little
be.
click or the
Yeah.
the magnetic impulse on the tape. So that's another possibility. I don't.
Yeah, I
recall.
didn't think about that. But I thought to myself, maybe they're listening for that little thump, and then they know to stop it.
Yeah.
And that's where they're going to start the next, after the commercials or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. It's really fascinating. Isn't it? Are there any extracurricular stories you got about you and Dad and some of the other guys?
Oh my.
I know that. Now, real quick, where did Bill Price show up with your?
He showed up at KUSN at some point, and I don't recall how he got involved in it.
Okay.
To be honest with you, but
Was he this job?
yeah, he was the disc jockey there. And then
And-
later on, he worked at KFEQ and did the all-night show.
Oh, that's right. He did some kind of trucker show, they called it, or something.
The all-night trucker, he called himself, or
I don't remember that.
I just remember it from Dad talking about it,
Okay.
and he just, it rang a bell just now when he said that. Yeah.
but he had listeners, all up and down, because the nighttime signals, I recall, went north and south.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go, if you're driving like I-29 from South Dakota, you could follow 29 all the way down to Kansas City
Right.
and listen to him if you wanted to at night, were interested in what we were doing.
Absolutely.
The Frog Hop used to be notorious for that.
I remember the frog hop. I remember we'd go out there. I don't know if Jimmy did. I guess he did. I don't know.
Yeah, I met Kenny Price at the Frog Hop one time.
But we'd go out there when the Blue Boys were in town. and
Oh
play.
yeah. So we'd have, I think it's like every 3 or 4 weeks there'd be a country artist there. Barbara Mandrell used
Yeah.
to be there. We had her out 3 or 4 times before she was ever big. She'd had a national contract, but she wasn't anything. And then,
Yeah.
obviously she became a big deal in country music. But
Yeah.
but out there, what you did, you brought your own alcohol in. They didn't have a liquor license, and you have to go to the back of the building, and they sold your mixes.
Condiments.
Condiments, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They sold ice and your 7-Up and Coke or ginger ale or whatever you wanted. So that's how they got around that.
Yeah. I remember the frog hop very well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and so
Didn't we look it up?
Yeah, we tried.
Like
we looked it up
carpet
last.
store or something now or something?
Yeah. It's not there anymore.
the building's still there. It's like a carpet and flooring
Yeah.
store now.
Yeah.
But they had these. The ceiling had all these metallic leaves on the top that, with the circulation blowing in, the air conditioning stuff, the leaves were blowing.
Okay.
It was kind of an interesting setup.
I don't remember that, but